In the previous episode of Pablo Escobar versus El Chapo, we were engaged in a tense battle to see which drug king comes out on top. We discovered that El Chapo's rise to power was much, much more gruesome than Pablo's. But now, the winds are shifting and Pablo will soon catch up. Find out how he immediately became more violent once he came into power in the episode of Explained. Pablo Escobar versus El Chapo. In 1971, Pablo had technically become a drug dealer, but his early prominence lies in the Marlboro Wars, which is not as cool as it sounds. It was just a bloody turf war for the control of Colombia's cigarette market, and Pablo played a high-stakes and high-profile role in it. Pablo's luck came from Colombia's position to be the biggest cocaine smuggler. Being a shrewd man, he quickly moved to grab control of this market, and even had a major kingpin allegedly assassinated to become the leader. Let us tell you how cocaine is made, kids, because it is an important part of how Pablo earned insane amounts of profit. He took very cheap cocoa powder and did a highly specialized process on it that transformed it into very expensive cocaine. It's a classic business. Pablo Escobar's rise in the world of drugs isn't anything too spectacular. He didn't magically rise through the ranks. He did it by crime. He proved himself to be trustworthy, well, as much as a criminal can be, as well as straightforward. Oh, and he murdered anyone who opposed him. By the mid-1980s, Pablo was already a billionaire 30 times over, as in his net worth was more than $30 billion. And he earned his money in cash. In fact, he had to buy a private plane just so he could transfer money from the States to Colombia. By now, he looked at himself as a Robin Hood figure. He wanted to not just be a killer and a terror for the people, but a leader for them. But to be fair, he did spend a lot on programs for the poor and even on infrastructure. In 1982, Escobar was elected as an alternative member of the Colombian Congress. But a justice minister exposed Escobar's methods of earning a living, and he was forced to resign. Of course, the justice minister was later killed. You've probably figured out by now that Pablo loved to kill people. He was responsible for thousands of deaths of politicians, journalists, and even civilians. After his failure in politics, he unleashed his fury on his enemies in an attempt to gain a general amnesty for all drug barons in exchange for giving up the world of drug trafficking. He killed 3 presidential candidates and thousands of police officers. He even allegedly bombed a plane which killed more than 100 people. For all his genius, Pablo didn't predict the very predictable reaction that came from the public. They turned against him, and therein lay his downfall. Now, let's go a bit further and explore El Chapo's journey. He got into the marijuana business with his cousins at 15. A few years later, he used the marijuana business to strike up a working relationship with Salazar, a drug lord. He continued working for drug lords and rose from being their driver to handling their logistics. When the largest kingpin was arrested, the cartel was divided, and El Chapo took control of the California and Arizona corridors. What made El Chapo's part so lucrative? Intelligence and violence. He built large air-conditioned corridors across the border to the U.S. and broke up shipments into smaller packages, which minimized losses and potential threats. A very innovative way he smuggled was by using cans of dried chili. Of course, none of this would have been possible without violence. He used cruelty to ensure discipline and loyalty. If you thought your boss was the devil, listen to this. El Chapo used to give a very incentivized punishment and shot anyone who showed up late. The zero-tolerance policy was actually quite effective, and his business grew to insane proportions. His cartel also became responsible for so many murders that they probably lost count as well. We have seen both kingpins rise But now we'll go into their fall, and it is spectacular. Well, El Chapo's fall was spectacular, but Pablo's fall was pretty standard. He surrendered to the government and was imprisoned in a prison he had built. Unsurprisingly, it came with a spa, a nightclub, and a casino. In 1992, he attempted to break out of this luxury facility when the government was considering moving him to a more standard facility. Then began the 16-month manhunt for the kingpin as his cartel broke up due to lack of leadership. Pablo's family sought refuge, but Pablo himself was refused such a privilege. The authorities caught up with him, and a firefight ensued where Pablo and his bodyguard were killed in a decidedly unglorious manner. El Chapo's story is a different feat. His downfall started with the Mexican government placed a bounty on his head. His face started appearing in public more and more often. Soon enough, he was captured. But 8 years inside were more than enough for El Chapo. He broke out of a top security jail, and experts say he didn't even have to organize an escape plan. He simply walked out with corrupt guards. After 13 years, during which he gained even more power, he was captured by Mexican Marines. He escaped again, this time with a little more drama. His accomplices burrowed a 1.5-mile tunnel that lied underneath his cell and led to a construction site. This escape came as a huge embarrassment to the president, who had failed his people again. So El Chapo's freedom was short-lived. His crimes caught up to him in 2016, where he was captured once more, but this time he was extradited to the U.S. His trial was something out of a movie. He offered nearly zero defense, and tales of his crimes came out in a very shocking manner, one of which was that he had actually buried a man alive. At the end, El Chapo got a life sentence in a maximum security prison. Unlike Pablo, he is alive and well, probably safer here than he would be in Sinaloa. But there you are, folks, the most incredible parts of El Chapo and Pablo Escobar's lives. Personally, we think El Chapo wins the battle of cruelty and wits. Do you agree with us? Why or why not? Comment below and we'll pin the best one. Make sure you like this video and share it with everyone who is familiar with the world of drugs. This was Explained, bringing you the inside scoop on drug lords. Tune in next time for even more entertaining and informative content.